I'm delighted now to introduce the new IFPMA Director General, David Reddy. David, would you like to join me? More than 30 years experience in drug development, including 13 years as head of the Medicines for Malaria venture MMV, where he established the largest portfolio of malaria drugs ever assembled. Also a board member for CEPI, the Coalition for Epidemic Preparedness. No rest for the wicked, as they say. So here you are in your new role. Let's talk about that, because the MMV where you came from was essentially established to address the lack of commercial incentive for developing drugs for diseases in the global south. Now you're head of the pharma industry, which is an entirely different kettle of fish. How's that transition been? Is it really different?
Okay, well look, thank you very much, and I'd just like to thank all the guests for being here this evening. So honourable ministers, excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, I know it's late in the evening, there's a lot happening, so your attendance is really appreciated. So the transition, I think if you look at it, there's huge similarities between what I did at MMV and what I'm hoping to do here at IFPMA. So firstly, I was blessed with a really talented and wonderful team at MMV, and I've moved into another extremely talented and really committed team at IFPMA, so it's a real pleasure to be now leading that team. In terms of the other commonalities, it's all about innovation and access to that innovation, and those are two of the key pillars of IFPMA, and they're core to the DNA of MMV, and they're core to my DNA as well. I've been working in the infectious disease space in some form or another for roughly 35 years. And so I've worked in some of the more challenging disease areas, one of them being HIV. And in that, I was very privileged to be part of the protease inhibitor push and later the entry inhibitors. But I also learned something else very early on. And just to recount an experience, I'd only been in the industry a couple of years, and I was invited to an event with the HIV community, and we were probably around 6 months from launching the first HIV protease inhibitor. And a man approached me, and he was very thin, and he had red blotches all over his face. And for any of you who have been involved in the early part of the AIDS epidemics, you will know that's Kaposi sarcoma, and it was a common feature of people with very advanced AIDS at that time. And he asked when he could get access, hoped to get access to the drug, and I knew the timelines for the approval and launch. We had a compassionate use program, but unfortunately it couldn't fulfill all of the requirements. And looking at him, I knew that he wouldn't get access to it because he didn't have time. And so what I saw at that exact moment was the imperative of ensuring access, but also urgency of access. And I saw exactly the same thing in going into MMV. I was very privileged to, within my first month, go into the field, go into a community in Ethiopia with community healthcare workers and see a young child who was recovering from malaria but also had malnutrition at the same time. And so you actually saw the burden of disease, the importance of actually getting medicines out to those who need them. So that's absolutely critical. And I think the third thing that was really core to what we did at MMV, what they do at MMV is partnership and working in collaboration, as Dr. Nishtar just very eloquently outlined. And I learned that also very early in my career in pharma, because we were challenged by the HIV community. And it was really uncomfortable, and they really pushed us hard. And they should. And we learned a lot, and we learned how to work together, and we learned how to co-create, and we learned how to discuss clinical trials together. So I came out of that with a deep sense of what partnership should be. That's what I lived when I was at MMV, and it's what I really intend to be living in my role at IFPMA.
Those personal stories have obviously made a huge impact on you. You're clearly very passionate about the need to get medicines to patients when they need them. But there seems to be so many challenges that impede that journey, don't there?
It's a complex endeavor in terms of developing drug and getting them to those that need them. It's really a continuum, and we do need to look at it end to end. The way that I look at drug development is it's really around assembling information that wraps around a molecule and takes it from safety in animals all the way through to an understanding of how it behaves in a patient, how it treats an infection or a condition, the safety of that, the quality of manufacturing and assembling all of that information. And then it goes through a regulatory pathway, which is essential to ensure quality, and that it does, and there is an independent mechanism to ensure that it does what we believe it does as sponsors. But then that's not the end of the journey, because it has to go into a context in healthcare, it has to go into communities, and you need to understand the context in which that medicine, that vaccine is going to be deployed to make sure it's fit and it can work. And then there's policy, and then there's financing. So it's a long continuum, and all of these things have to be lined up. And this is where it's really important to just underscore that it's not something that we as industry can do alone. We can only do it in partnership, and there's a whole lot of partners along that continuum that need to be consulted, which gets back to that word about co-creation and the importance of working together.
You mentioned innovation, and I mean, this is something that we hear about every day. We seem to be on a wave of incredible advances, new discoveries, new medical technology. What innovations in the healthcare sphere are you most excited about?
Okay, so firstly, I'm a nerd, so I love the science talk, so this is brilliant. But just in terms of the breathtaking pace of innovation, yes and no. No, because it's great to have seen the way that the mRNA vaccines came through. They were there just when they were needed. They were there because of 2 decades of work. And in fact, when I did my PhD back in the late 80s, and that gives away my age, I was working on mRNA as a therapeutic at the time. So it's great to see it now, but it just takes a long time. But those were there at the right time, and with the right effort and competencies that have been developed since, companies were able to partner together and really accelerate getting them to the patients, or getting them to people, to prevent them from becoming patients, actually. And so if you look at some of the things that really excite me, so I think we're living the monoclonal revolution, if you like, not globally yet, and in terms of access, that's something industry is really working on as well at this time. But then we see nanobodies, we see conjugated antibodies, we see the mRNA technology, the individualization of therapy all coming together. And I think this is going to be underpinned by AI, because AI gives us the ability in machine learning to select with greater precision the types of molecules that might become medicines, to be able to chart out the pathway in a way that compresses development timelines, can be far more precise in the way we go into patients. When I was at MMV, the team there were working on machine learning that allowed us to predict concentrations of drug in blood of patients, and this is before we even got into patients, and then also the concentrations in pregnant women, in breast milk, etc. So to really give us a jump on some of the big questions. And so I think with an underpinning of AI, if used correctly, that could really accelerate things.
Yeah, I mean, AI can help design molecules, design new drugs, but we're seeing healthcare systems increasingly underburdened with factors like climate change and mass migration. These innovations are pointless if they don't get to the people who need them.
Yeah, and I think that so the access component of this is absolutely critical. And when we look at industry, industry is they're full of smart people, and the global health community is full of really smart people as well. In industry, I think what you've seen is a really solid commitment to turn that innovation not only to discovering and developing new molecules, which is really important, but also to the access side of things and to working in partnership. To achieve that, I think what you see is different sizes of companies, different types of interventions, and so the mix, the way that's achieved, may be different from company to company. We've seen tiered pricing, we've seen donation models, particularly during COVID. We've seen technical transfers being used. So this type of mix is being used in a way that is facilitating increased access, and I foresee that the pace of that will increase.
I just want to pick you up more about partnerships, because tonight's event, of course, is all about partnerships, and you've mentioned the importance of partnerships and collaboration, and how the IFPMA is behind that 100%. What is the IFPMA's role as a partner within the global health community, and how do you stop it just being a buzzword?
So one of the key roles of IFPMA has several roles, and I think as Dr. Nishta said, we seem to be a little bit everywhere, and kind of that's part of our role. But it's really working with the multilateral organizations, and I think that's another thing that I just want to really underscore here is the importance of multilateral organizations and the WHO. We need to come together as a global community. And I'm going to quote Mike Ryan here. And in discussions with Mike, and we can have some fairly fierce conversations, and that's really good to be able to have those. And he's a really good sparring partner. But what he said was, in global health, there's 80% of things we actually agree on, and 20% of the difference. We may have differences. And instead of focusing on the 20%, why don't we focus on the 80% and make progress? And it doesn't mean we should ignore the areas of difference. We should really debate them. But don't forget that we are so aligned in so many ways. And so I just want to underscore that coming into this role, working with the multilateral organizations, working with WHO particularly, and with the other agencies, is something I'm really looking forward to, and really deepening that partnership.
Successful partnerships then are ones with shared goals, which sounds obvious, but in terms of what the goals encompass, that's also the patient voice, yeah?
Absolutely. And so I think that, it's something that I mentioned when I was talking about the HIV experience, was just the importance of patients and patient advocacy groups. And, it started back then just because of I think the frustration, the many social issues associated with HIV. It started from a very emotional place. And what I found coming into it, as an industry person, it was often, quite conflictual. But when you actually began to discuss problems and then discuss programs and start to work together on things, that subsided. And so there was just what was a watershed moment for me, where I'd been through a really difficult discussion with a group from the HIV community, and it was at a conference, and I thought, I'm going to go into the bar, and I went into the bar and I found them all there, and so no escape in the bar, let me tell you. So I went and had a drink with them, and ended up going out to dinner. They invited me to dinner afterwards, and we sat, and I think for me it was a real watershed moment, because yes, we did have differences, we were able to discuss them, but at the end of the day, we're all people operating in the same ecosystem. And so I think that that's really important, and that really lends itself to a philosophy of co-creation, because in industry we have great strengths, but we don't know everything, and we don't know what it is to be every patient in every country, and that's why we need to reach out.
Yeah, I think co-creation is a great way of putting it. So you joined IFPMA at quite an interesting time. The pandemic agreement negotiations were at a critical stage when you joined. It has been, and I think we all agree, it continues to be a difficult negotiation, which may go on for some time yet. What are your reflections on where things stand?
Okay, well, my first reflection is this is really hard stuff. And so it's all about learning what worked well during the pandemic, and learning where we really need to improve, and doing something about it. Industry is really committed to ensuring that there is an agreement. We see huge value in this, and huge value in having that dialogue. As I mentioned, the two sides of this coin, what worked well, what didn't work well, I think we all acknowledge what worked well was that innovation came to the fore. It was available in breakthrough time. Partnerships were forged that we'd never seen before, between industry partners, between different sectors. It was incredibly, I think, it went far beyond my expectations. On the other side, What didn't work well was equitable access, particularly timely equitable access. And that's something that the low and middle income countries are rightfully really concerned about, and they're really hurt about. And so I think they see this also as an issue of justice. And what are we going to do better next time? And I think if we seriously want to get this right, we need to take the time to have a really good discussion, including different sectors and different expertise, and actually come to a more nuanced view on what it's going to take to ensure that we're better prepared globally next time around.
Yeah, and I think that's going to be the key question, whether we're going to be prepared for a future pandemic. So we watch and wait to see where that goes. As we come to the end of this conversation, I suppose what I really want to ask you is that you're 1 month in, which I know Dr. Sanya Nishtar said that she was 9 weeks old, so that makes you an octogenarian in this role, but not very long. As you look ahead to the future with your new role, what are you most looking forward to?
Okay, there's a couple of things that I'm really looking forward to. So firstly, you know, I'm the youngest of 7 kids, so I actually like being part of a team. It doesn't mean I always agree, but so I'm really...
Were all 7 of you actually a team at all times?
So I think that's the point. Yeah, so you learn to negotiate as well. But what I'm really looking forward to is working with the team. I'm looking forward to engaging with the industry partners and getting to know a lot more of them. But I'm also really looking forward to the dialogue with the wider global health community. I made a point of, within my first, even before I started, and within the first couple of months, meeting people who don't necessarily agree with me or with industry's point of view. And I think that that's what I'm most looking forward to. It's about building bridges and building partnerships and seeing if we can surprise people and operate in a really different way. You know, I think industry's been operating really well, but I just want to broaden that reach of dialogue and bring more voices who are perhaps, you know, we're not hearing right now where there is disagreement, and saying, you know, how can we actually put the problem in the center, not our ideologies, but the problem, and actually work on this together.
David, it's been an absolute pleasure to speak with you. Thank you very much indeed. Welcome to your new role, and please join me in welcoming the new IFPMA Director General.
Thanks so much.